Professor. So this is going to be my video on the Vision Project. The problem I chose was pollution, water pollution basically. I'd say that humans most definitely play a huge role in that due to plastic consumption or maybe not disposing of their plastic and trash properly. I can't find the link to it anymore, but I watched this video showing the movement of a plastic bag floating in the water and how that mimics the movement of jellyfish, which is one of the animals that turtles eat. And so a turtle is not going to be able to tell the difference between the jellyfish and the plastic bag. The video showed the turtle eating and swallowing the plastic bag, and I just felt really helpless watching that because, obviously they don't know any better, and that definitely could have been prevented. Also, microplastics are part of it too. It could be eaten when they go up onto the shore and onto the beach, or the microplastics are also floating in the water and they can consume those easily because they're so tiny. And this plastic pollution is one of the many different reasons that contribute to global warming. And a lot of people say to not use plastic straws to save the turtles, which is helpful. It helps lower that number of plastic things that could end up in the ocean, but as we've talked about throughout the semester, it's not like using a reusable bag at the grocery store or choosing to not get a plastic straw when you go to Starbucks is not going to make the most biggest difference. It could be minor though, but it is still helping. Some of the bigger issues are like factories and emissions and things like that. Things that are just at a much more larger scale impact global warming much more than just like plastic bags. The plastic pollution in the ocean and bodies of water is still mind-boggling to me, how much waste and trash and plastic are like stuck in the ocean. How it just shows the domino effect of like how it affects habitats, different species and animals, how not having enough animals because of they die because of plastic or anything like that, people in different countries and people here don't get to fish for the fish that they need or get the resources from the ocean that they were used to having, and now their resources are lessened because maybe a village overfished and now people or families have to ration things like that. Just to talk about my poster a little more, it focuses on green sea turtles and how their ecosystems are being disturbed and invaded by plastic in the ocean. And one of the things that inspired the making of my poster was this group and company called 4Ocean. I actually have the little bag here. They started as a small organization. Now they're much bigger, just because of like exposure on social media, and they gained popularity through that. They address issues. Their main issue is pollution and single-use plastics and the effect that waste has on people who live near the water or near the coastlines, and how this pollution, how it affects those people and indigenous people and people who are impoverished and have no choice but to live in these areas that are polluted and who also depend on resources for fish to eat and things like that. The harmful effects of this plastic pollution on habitats, animals, and things like that are all part of their mission statement. Their main product are beaded bracelets, glass beaded bracelets, which are all handmade, and all of the packaging that the the bracelets and their products come in are all compostable or recyclable. With each bracelet or product that's bought, the funds of that goes toward the removal of 1 pound of trash that they get to clean up and pick up from the ocean and the coastlines. They also describe next to each bracelet how your purchase or your potential purchase could be making a positive difference. And they also give you links to different ways of how you can help, whether that's with their company or suggestions to do things locally and even globally, which is how the company started in the first place. So basically, these two guys were traveling and surfing around the world, but while they were surfing, they noticed that there was just a lot of garbage and plastic in the oceans, and they wanted to do something about that because they also saw that it affected the people in the communities that lived on these beaches and near these beaches and along the coastlines. And after like interacting with the community and asking them how it affects them, they realized that something really needed to change, and so they created 4Ocean. But anyway, back to the topic. I'm personally connected and impacted by water pollution because my backyard is a delta. I live on the Pittsburgh Delta, which connects to the Sacramento River, and there's a lot of wildlife that live here. I've seen otters, there's different birds, fish, of course, turtles, and there's also a lot of trash that ends up in our delta. A lot of plastic, a lot of things that just float along the delta and, obviously don't belong there. And sometimes I'm sure the pollution is unintentional, like whenever we have a rainstorm or a windstorm, the next day there's always a lot of things that end up in the delta because the way that my neighborhood is set up, the backs of our houses face each other with the water in the middle. Things in people's backyards could end up, flying from the windstorm and into the water, down the dock and into the water. Like I've seen like volleyballs, plastic bags, just fishing poles, fishing line, things that just don't belong in there. But of course that was nobody's intention. My family and I actually have done our part, or we have before, by cleaning up in the delta and doing things to remove some of the waste that we found. Like my brother would go on our canoe and just kind of row around and catch things in his net. And so he'd like get plastic bags or the trash that is at the surface of the water, not diving deep into the delta, but just kind of floating around and picking up things and then bringing up back to our dock and disposing of it properly. There's actually one time my dad pulled out a wood dresser with my neighbor, which you could imagine was really heavy because it was wood and it was full of water. But yeah, just things like that end up in the delta sometimes, and we do what we can to lessen that and prevent from things like that falling into the water. This water connects to so much more, and yeah, we're just looking out for all of that because we're part of this environment and we should definitely do our part to take care of it in the ways that we can. And I also live near refineries and factories. I can actually see a handful just from my bedroom window. Some of them are abandoned and some of them are still active, I think. And that also contributes to the pollution here. Well, that's air pollution, but yeah, it all kind of plays a role together in the pollution of the neighborhood that I live in. So things people can do as the action part, people can just be mindful. Just start by being mindful of your own consumption and waste of plastic. Simple things like disposing of your waste properly and not being careless about it. can use reusable bags, and minor things like that do help toward the bigger problem. Or you could do things that are a little bit bigger than that, like organize local events. You could do beach cleanups. My high school used to host beach cleanups, and we would walk down to the beach from our school. Or you could donate your time and or money to organizations that do consciously make this effort to reduce and help prevent issues like this, like pollution and all the consequences that come with it, eventually, and in hopes to completely eradicate the problem, even though it'll probably take a really, really, really long time, if that's ever reached. But it's still, it's better to do something than to just say, oh, well, it's never going to be resolved, so why even try? But yeah, like funding companies, or like 4Ocean, or looking for more local companies. I know that my neighborhood, or my city that I live in Pittsburgh, hosts things like that, like events to help clean up, or to just be more self-aware at like town hall meetings, because we do live on the water, and people who don't live on the water here, our neighborhood still connects to the Sacramento River, so we're surrounded by the water, and it affects all of us one way or another, whether it's the runoff and like toxic chemicals that are being released from the factories into the water, or if it's trash being dumped into the delta. It affects each of us one way or another. And I don't live in a fancy or upper class neighborhood. My neighborhood is being gentrified slowly, but there are still people who have lived here for a long time. We try to be mindful of the environmental things around us that contribute to this problem of pollution. I know that there was even petitions out to try and remove one of the abandoned plants. It's a PG&E plant that hasn't been touched for years, but the land around it is, I believe, toxic, and it's just honestly a waste of space and a waste of like land, and it's not good for the land that it sits on, because it runs into a marsh, and that's not good for the people that live there, and just the water that it runs into, which again connects into our delta and to the river. So people in my neighborhood do what they can to try and like spread awareness and things like that about environmental issues like that. Basically doing your part to help make that difference, and to help just prevent from things from further getting worse into that issue. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks for listening.